Hello. I hope you guys can hear me okay. Welcome to another Sunday live stream. My name is Brittany Lewis. I am an artist, illustrator, tarot deck enthusiast, and a whole bunch of other adjectives that can be attributed to me. And I hope you're having a great Sunday. So, this Sunday, we are working on a brand new card. Now, if you're new here, every Sunday, I take this time to work on my dream project, the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. And the last couple Sundays ago, we were working on the not Page of Pentacles, the Two of Pentacles. And this Sunday, we get a chance to work on a brand new one. We're working on the Two of Swords. So if you're watching this live or you're watching the replay, I really appreciate you all for being here. I do want to show you what we completed. So last week, we had a great interview or a great sort of chit chat with Sam and Lee, where we talked a lot about some of my favorite tips and tricks for being a digital artist. And if you have not checked that out, I highly encourage you to go do that, especially if you're into creating and sort of want to get an idea of just some of the things that make characters consistent and, how to, turn a character and things like that. So different tricks and things like that I shared with Sam and Lee. If you're interested in that kind of thing, I highly recommend you check that out. But before that, we were working on the Two of Pentacles. Hey, Black Zetsu. Hey, PL. How y'all doing? Hope y'all are doing all right. So yeah, if you have not had a chance to check that out, please go and do that as soon as possible once this live stream is over. Of course, I think you'll get a whole lot out of it. At least I hope you do. So I want to show you guys the Two of Pentacles. So where we left off, I was in the process of creating the waves for our character who's dancing and balancing her two pentacles. And I kind of gave you a behind the scenes glimpse of how I tackle sort of the things that I'm not necessarily, I don't want to say great with, but just things that I'm steady learning, right? Or continuing to learn and get better with. And in this case, it was waves. But we finished it. I finished the card. I love how she turned out. And I'll zoom in here for you all to be able to see it. The waves, I think, give a slight chaotic energy, which I like for this card because it's all about balancing different, aspects of life, right? So I wanted to give a lot of motion, a lot of, I don't want to say drama, but just a lot of movement in the waves. And I think I accomplished that pretty well. And with the infinity symbol, that was one of those things that I consider a happy accident because I was actually going into drawing this with some color and it was kind of taking over the picture. It was sort of washing out our character. And I think changing it to a white and then creating an overlay effect so that it sort of looks like a glass or sort of like a mirror, I think adds to the Afrofuturism aspect of this particular deck. And I think it just worked. It's one of those things that just works. So I want to zoom in so you guys can see some of the texture and things like that. I don't know yet if I'm going to offer this as a canvas print. If this is something that you all are interested in buying, maybe as a journal or canvas print, please be sure to let me know about that in the comments or in the chat. I love to hear your feedback. But yeah, the Two of Pentacles, I think she turned out really, really nice. I really, really do. I think she turned out nice. Even the color of her leotard, which I was not sure I was going to keep at first, but I think it just works. Hey, everybody. Yes, I love that. Yes, it looks a lot like airbending. Yeah, that gives that whole vibe of airbending. So I love that. That's a great analogy or sort of a great comparison. Yeah, so I think she turned out great. Now, while I was working on this, I sort of made the declaration that like landscapes are not my thing, right? Landscapes, and I keep trying to clean this up because I don't want it to like permanently not be my thing. Like I definitely want to continue to grow and evolve as an artist. So as I was working on the Two of Swords, I knew for sure that I wanted to do this in like a foresty type of area, and so I intentionally tried to do better, and I didn't do too bad. I don't think I did too bad at all. Last week, or just before or I'll say last week during our last live stream, I gave the demonstration of how I break things into shapes, right? So how I break things down to like the most basic shapes just to make it easier for me. And this was one of those things that I did. So as I was, drawing the forest, and was wanting to express an elevated space, I just broke it down into a box, and I'll show you guys a little bit. You can kind of see it in the sketch a little bit. You can kind of see it where I started as There we go. I started with a, no, oh, come on, computer. There we go. Okay. I started with just a basic, box, and then I was able to draw in all of the details on top of this, and that was one of the things that we talked a lot about in our last live stream. So if you have not checked it out, please do. Now I was watching it back, because I do like to watch these back just to kind of see where I can improve. I'm always trying to learn and grow and be a better person, but also just technology wise, if there's something that's happening within the stream that maybe I need to like try to fix, like when the camera freezes and things like that. So anyhow, I was watching the live stream back, and I got to the part where I was showing, or on my screen I was looking at the tablets and things that I was using for digital art. And as I was watching it back, I was like, oh my goodness, they can't see what I'm talking about. So it gave me the idea, and you guys let me know how you feel about this, where in that live stream we did talk a little bit about some of the tools that I use, some of the programming, some of the tools that I use as a digital artist. And because you couldn't really see what I was looking at as I was showing, like, the tablet and things like that, I was thinking of doing a standalone video where I just run through the whole list. If there's something that you're interested in, let me know. I probably do it anyway, but I would like to gauge you guys' interest to see if, going behind the scenes of the best tablets that I would recommend, the best programming that I recommend, and just different things that I actually use. Let me know. I wanted to show you guys during that video, like the actual pen display that I draw on, which I'll be looking down at. So if you guys see me looking down, I'm actually looking down at my pen display. But I wanted to show you guys what that was, where I kind of started, the tools that I used when I started out that are still available, so that getting into digital art is, accessible to everyone, no matter what your budget is. So if that's something that you're interested in, please let me know. If you're watching this live or in the replay, let me know in the chat or let me know in the comments. But I think that would be a great idea, just to kind of, and it might be a long video, but I want to make sure that I continue to share that information, because I know there are lots and lots of artists and things who are wanting to get into digital art and may not know where to start, right? So yeah, that's my thoughts. That's a little housekeeping. The last thing is that I will be working in Clip Studio Paint. This is the screen that you all are seeing. It is my illustration program of choice. I enjoy it. It reminds me a lot of Photoshop, which is where I started my digital art journey way back in, was 2006, 7, 8, somewhere in there. Clip Studio Paint was just an easy transition for me. I like it. A lot of illustrators that I know use it and enjoy it. And so that's what we're going to be working in today. So what I just did while I was talking was I gathered all of my sketch material, and some of this you won't be able to see, but all of the information that I have here, and I put it in a folder, labeled it sketch. Okay. So we're working on the Two of Swords. Got all of my sketches kind of put together. What I'm going to be doing is actually drawing underneath the sketch, right? So the sketches will act as sort of like I guess if you're thinking of a coloring book, right? You have the lines there and then you color within the lines. This is sort of what we got going on, except if you're familiar with my art, I do not use line art. So this is just going to be a little bit of a blueprint. Now, when I came to, actually, let me make this a little bit bigger, or darker, so that I can kind of explain my thought process with the Two of Swords. So this will be my left, and I don't know. Yeah, I guess it'll be to the left side of the screen. Within my reference box is the original Rider-Waite-Smith Two of Swords. Okay. Now, this Two of Swords usually represents choice. And when we went into planning for these cards, I kind of found a pattern. So two of the twos deal a lot with harmony and balance, like very obviously. I think they all kind of deal with balance, but very obviously, the Two of Cups, the Two of Pentacles both dealt with balance and harmony. And the Two of Wands and the Two of Swords deal a lot more with planning and decision making. Now, for me, just looking at this card, it doesn't necessarily say decision making to me, right? Now, if I were to do a deep dive into this, you can read some of Rachel Pollack's work, because she does a wonderful job of breaking down tarot. Of course, she goes into the symbolism and how both of the swords are, equally heavy, and she's holding them up, she's blindfolded and these kinds of things. But if I'm reading this intuitively without having any sort of background information for the Two of Swords, I don't get decision. right? So when I went into planning for the Two of Swords, I wanted to make that a little more obvious, right? And the first thing that kind of came to mind, and this is sort of the process I go through when I'm, trying to decide which direction, whether to stick to the traditional imagery or to create something else. What I do is ask myself, what would that look like in an everyday scenario, right? And so to me, the first thing that popped up, and this was one of the cards I had the hardest time trying to figure out how I wanted to articulate it, but eventually I got around to doing a fork in the road sort of situation. Now, when I go into coloring this card, I want it to look like both paths are somewhat identical. And the only thing that's different is sort of the shape of this tree, but in terms of what the paths look like, because the two swords in the original Two of Swords are very identical, I want both of my paths to look identical, right? I didn't necessarily feel the need to show my character blindfolded, but the way that I'll sort of approach that is just to make it a nighttime scene, right? So in the original, you got the moon out, so obviously it's nighttime, and she's blindfolded, which is a little bit interesting in and of itself. But I just wanted to make this a nighttime scene so that it's even more of a challenge to pick sort of the right path. And I would argue in this particular case, there's no wrong path, right? So even in life, there really is no wrong path. Even though we sometimes say that people go down the wrong path, I think that wherever you go or wherever you end up in life, there are lessons there for us, right? So in this particular case, I didn't want it to be an obvious right or wrong. Just like in our original source material, there is no obvious right or wrong choice, although and she's choosing blindly, right? So I wanted to kind of play with that a little bit in a different situation, right? So I have our character at this fork in the road, and we're going to illustrate somewhat identical paths. Now, the swords prior to this in the Cosmic Gateways Tarot are based on the Zulu short sword or short spear. I'm not really sure the technical name of it, but they're all Zulu short swords, right? And I was researching that, and I was researching different swords throughout the continent of Africa, because one of the things that I wanted to focus on in this particular deck is making a conscious effort of being as diverse within the diaspora as possible. So I got the idea of just researching different swords and blades and things like that throughout Africa. And I think what I'm going to do is, as I make my way through the sword suit, they'll be different, right? There'll obviously be swords. The meanings will hopefully register and read as what they're intended to register and read as. But I thought that would be kind of a fun sort of Easter egg nod thing. Excuse me, sound like I said eggnog. An Easter egg or a nod to just sort of, representation, right? So we have these really wonderful, beautiful swords that originate in Ghana, and these are decorative swords, which can also add a little bit of a little layer of sort of mysticism, a little layer of meaning to the cards, because if they're decorative swords, they really don't have a function other than being decorative. And again, that goes into neither of these paths. You could choose either path and be okay, right? All right. So I went researching, of course, for this deck, and not for this deck, but just for like reference material and things like that, and with the idea that I wanted this to be at night. So I have over where our Two of Swords reference is, I have a bunch of references that I would like to use. Now, I was watching artist Yoshi Tani, who was talking a lot about color palettes, and I thought at first to pick a color palette and kind of stick within that color palette, but I couldn't really find one that spoke to the vibe that I was going for. So I gathered a bunch of references, right? And I think this is the one that I'll probably lean the most to, because I love how you have the color of the fire and you have the blue of the woods, and so you have this warm and cool sort of color palette going on. So I probably stick to this one, because and then too, it has I had in my mind that this would be a very blue painting. So I'm thinking of that, but I do have some others that I'll show you guys, just sort of where I'll be picking and choosing from references in terms of like the way the trees are shaped and the way the light sort of hits. And so we're going to play around with it today. Now, we do have a storm on the horizon. So if this, hey everyone. So if this stream ends abruptly, I want to tell you right now that I really appreciate you all for being here, and I wish you guys a happy, creative, and prosperous week. So if I don't get the chance to tell you that later on, if the power goes out, all of a sudden I wanted to tell you that here and now. So I certainly wish you all have a wonderful week this week, and I hope you had a wonderful week last week. Nowhere for my astrology buffs, we're coming out of Mercury retrograde, which has been interesting to me. I don't, thankfully, didn't feel too much of the effect of the retrograde, other than the technology aspect of it, where it kind of messes with technology. But other than that, it's been pretty cool. I tend to be of the mind that even though these cosmic events are happening, you could get to a point where you kind of transcend those things, right? So they don't affect you as much as they would, otherwise. And so thankfully this this retrograde, I had a pretty okay time. So what I just did was I picked a color, and I picked sort of the mid tone. So I would consider this light blue, which is part of the sky. I would consider that the brightest, aside from this, golden orange. I consider this a mid-tone, right? So this is sort of halfway between my darkest darks and my lightest lights, because this is going to be the picture that I use for sort of the vibe of this particular painting. So pick the mid-tone. We're going to create that and label it as BG, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. Maybe we'll see. But if I do, I want to label it. And this one, I think I'm going to label. What do I want to paint next? Let's do the ground. So when I was gathering my references, I wanted to make sure that I had sort of a look of the way the ground looks. I wanted to see how trees reflect or are visible in dark. And so I'm taking a look at all of these references, not just this one. That one this one I'm using for colors, right? But I also have references that sort of help me pay attention to how trees are shaped, especially this area here. So you have, and I'll zoom in so you guys can see it a little bit better. So we have our sort of, the further this picture goes back, the lighter things get and the more ambiguous things get. So you don't have as crisp of a tree line as you have up front. So those sorts of things are the types of things that you pay attention to when you are picking references. One of the things that I've done personally as an artist, and I know a lot of young artists do, is that we tend to copy references exactly the way they are. And we don't, and sometimes people sell them. I've been guilty of that, especially in my fan art days. I would just sort of pick a picture. I would compose it in a way that was a little bit different. For instance, I have a Eartha Kitt that I did where she's sort of on the right side of the page, but in terms of creating the picture, I was pretty much just drawing from photograph, right? And so that happens a lot of times with artists as we pull from references. But as you evolve, I want you guys to be able to use references not just as something to outright copy, but just, sort of find your light references. Maybe you like the lighting in this one and you like the way the trees are composed in that one. And that way it comes sort of a I don't want to say a Frankenstein effect, but you sort of have a mash and you can kind of create something original from those references. So, so I like, again, I like how this looks in the background. So I think I'm going to try, because this is close enough to our blues. And what I did as I was creating this sketch was I used a symmetry ruler. And this is going to help for a couple of reasons, or a couple of ways, right? This is going to both help keep both sides the same, right? Going back to us wanting these paths to look somewhat identical. And then also, this will kind of shorten the amount of work that I have to do, because if I draw on one side, it'll show up on the next side. So I want to label this background forest. And what we're going to do is I'm going to pull in some of this blue back here, and I'm just going to paint it in. Now, there are a couple of ways you could do this if you're doing digital art. You could use the lasso tool, which will allow you to outline a shape, and then you can just fill it in the same way that we did with our background. We could just use the paint bucket tool and kind of fill things in. I want to do the brush strokes because I haven't painted since I finished the Two of Pentacles, and so this is just sort of my way of warming up So it may be a little bit of a lag, and that is on my end, but I am going to work with it, not against it. We'll do our best. But yeah, I hope you guys are having a great Sunday today. I really do. I hope that August was good to you, and I hope that September is even better for you for sure. So the further back we go, the lighter this is going to be. So we're creating a little bit of depth here, right? And it's going to look identical until I get to painting the foremost tree. And the reason that I did that, and if you're one of those people that relies very heavily on the symmetry ruler for your drawing and things like that, one of the ways to sell the concept is to turn it off, and then in your foreground, or as you sort of create your pictures, make something a little asymmetrical, right? So if we're looking at this sketch, the for the most part, the background is just about the same, right? But when we get into this tree, and we know this because as I was painting on this side, it kind of paints over the tree. But as we get into this tree, it's a little bit asymmetrical, and that sort of helps sell the illusion. So one thing I heard a long time ago, which had to do with writing fiction, was that you can make up anything, right? But it has to make sense to the reader. So same thing when it comes to creating artworks. You know, you can draw anything, but it still has to sort of make sense to the reader, because anything that's out of place, or just seems too unusual, people will pick up on. And that's one of the things that I think that AI is having trouble with. My husband was asking me not long ago, could you tell, like, because he doesn't know much about it, but he was like, can you tell if it's AI? And I was like, you certainly can tell an AI image, because the eye picks up on those anomalies, right? So if you're creating with the symmetry tool, like I am here, where I can draw on one side, and it shows up identical to the other side, you want to be able to alter your image in a way, or alter some aspect of your image where it's not all symmetrical, because it'll look odd, right? So even if you're drawing faces, a lot of people's faces for the most part seem symmetrical when you are looking straight ahead. But if we're, using that symmetry tool to draw a face, it's going to look weird. It is just kind of part of it, because our faces have very small, you know, um, nuances and things like that. And one thing I learned about nature, just sort of studying, is there are no straight lines. So that's something else that you want to kind of keep in mind. There are no straight lines when it comes to nature. Now we're just laying down some basic stuff, just like with our Two of Pentacles. Nothing here is going to be fancy. Um, all of this is going to be built upon, right? None of this is going to be like in its final form. This is just our very first preliminary pass, kind of getting the idea, kind of getting the colors down and things like that. So I'm going to add on top of that, I want to kind of articulate this front bush, right? And I'm going to go through the same thing. I'm going to lay down a base color, and it's going to be very dark. And then we'll build upon that by adding details and things like that. And that's when I'll bust out some of my specialty brushes, which I don't normally use. But we'll call this the big bush. Don't normally use, but there are special instances where specialty brushes are clutch. And so I have some, and I should have wrote this lady's name down. I'm real bad about names, but there's an artist who does landscapes so well, right? And she actually sells her leaf brushes, not leaf brushes. She offers them for free actually, but you can give her a donation and things like that. Going back to that supporting artist conversation that we had a few weeks ago. My getting these brushes. I just need to remember her name. I'll have it next time. I think it's Danny something, child. But she makes these really, really nice landscape brushes that I find so very helpful. And we're just laying down the base color, right? So this is super dark, but this pushes our background back a little bit. And of course, I'm going to go into it with a little bit of green. It might be a very, very dark green, but just to kind of add some dimension to this. And then we're going to actually make it look like, what it's supposed to look like. We're just laying down. We're just playing right now, right? So when you're creating art, I know a lot of times we kind of get into the idea of things have to be perfect, and go into perfectionism and things like that. But don't take yourself too seriously. Just have to play, have fun. Like Bob Ross would say. I grew up watching Bob Ross, so when I'm talking about happy accidents, there's very very much a learned perspective. So to have happy accidents. So I just added a new layer, and we're going to add some rocks to this. And I think I want to actually, let me go back. I think I want to use, even though that's in the distance, how do I want to approach this? So I know I have some rocks drawn in behind this bush. And let's see if I can find kind of like sort of this gray color, but I'm going to make it a little bit lighter. We're going to draw these rocks in. Just the shape of them. Again, nothing fancy. We're just having fun. And this is how I'm going to approach it, right? Actually, I can make that a lot darker. Because I want it to look like he's having a tough time finding his way. I also want this to look very mystical. If you guys are familiar with my strength card, the strength card demonstrates or depicts a young warrior who's sort of coming out of a forest, and I feel like this could be an extension of that scene, of that idea. So just add in a little bit of dimension, and I have all of these on separate layers so that I can go and approach each layer by itself. And then as I sort of go along this picture, I tidy everything up and, flatten it a little bit. Not too much though, because I might actually come back and, make some adjustments. We might come back and make some adjustments. All right. So I'm going to turn off my symmetry ruler, and I'm going to paint in this tree, foremost tree. What do I want to do? Turn it off. And today's a pretty chill day. I know these last couple of weeks, I say off and on. I think we did the live streams where I did interviews every other week, right? So we've had lots and lots of very great, awesome conversations um, over the last month. But we're back to just being us, watching this demonstration again. Now again, if you didn't miss it, I'm considering doing a standalone video where I go through all of my tools, pricing, and the whole 9 yards, my favorite programs for different things, for being a digital artist. If that's something that you're interested in seeing or knowing about, please be sure to leave that in the comments, right? And I like that we left a little bit of blue here. Why? Because it's going to be reflecting some of that background a little bit. But if you're interested in, learning more about that, getting some very specific details about the products that I use, the tools that I use, some of my favorite YouTubers, if you're wanting to learn more like specific tutorials and things like that, let me know if that's something you're interested in. Again, I probably do it anyway, just because it's on my mind. I feel like when inspiration hits, sometimes you have to go ahead and act on that inspiration, act on those ideas. But I would love to hear if that is something that you're actually interested in, or if I'll just be, doing it because I want to do it. So I would love to hear your perspective on that. And if you have some favorite tools, if you're an artist as well, and you have some favorite tools, some favorite tips and tricks that you would like to add to the conversation, please do. Please do. Okay, so these are all of the sort of, it's not pretty. It's not going to be pretty for a while, but that kind of gives me a little bit of a basis. I have there's a bush here, right? So I have that colored in. I have the rock behind it colored in. That's the tree. You can see the rock behind it. Oh, let me finish this so I know what front means. Front tree, the rock behind it. We also have the bushes, and then we have our background. So that's sort of the basis of the background of this picture, right? So let's work on the foreground a little bit. Actually, you know what? Okay. So I'm labeling all of my layers, and we're gonna keep it going. So now this is really dark, as you guys can see in this particular reference, right? The things that are in the front of this picture are the darkest things, right? So we're going to keep that going. So I have a tree that comes from the side here and it goes down and it comes closer to our character. So we're going to paint that in dark as well, which means that this bush is probably going to be a little bit lighter, but we'll work that out a little bit later. So I'm going to turn my symmetry ruler back on because we want to work smart, not hard. Turn that bad boy back on and let's get some of this really, really dark. And that pushes our background further back, which is nice. So we're playing with the eye a little bit. As a matter of fact, because this is somewhat close and we want, depending on where we want our focus, this may not get a whole lot of detail. Because if I want my focus to be on the swords, then I don't want to render out my, foreground trees and things like that as much as I do my person and then the swords in the background. So we're just going to play with it. Again, we're just playing. And if this is your first live stream with me and you've seen, I don't even know, how familiar you guys are with my artwork, but if you've seen some of my art, especially the time lapses, you're probably like, what the hell are you doing? Don't worry. Trust the process. It's very much a trust the process sort of situation. It's going to look good. I promise. Yeah. This is why I really, really enjoy these sorts of live streams, because you guys get an opportunity to see what it takes to make a picture. So I have a video, and I talk a lot about this video for different reasons, but I do have a video that I published a few months ago, that dealt with procrastination. And in that video, there's a time lapse that took me about 14 hours to do, right? That time lapse or that painting started just like this. It started just like this, right? There wasn't anything fancy about it. It started, and then slowly we build up and we sort of, go along with the process of creating. You just have fun with it. So I'm going to actually go with, and this is a grayer color. I'm going to raise the saturation up on this a little bit. And what we're going to do is underneath this layer, because I want to actually draw underneath, I'm going to do this as the heel. And I'm just going to paint this in, keeping in mind that this is a box, which means that the top, just like your regular old boxes for you guys who are studying basic shapes, which I highly recommend you doing, one side is going to be a little bit darker than the other. This actually should be the lighter side. Let me go back, because our light source is from the lamp, so it's going to hit this a little bit different. So, and that's lighter than I would like, but that's because our darks are super duper dark. So we'll balance this out a little bit later. We're just laying down the basis of this heel, and we'll add some texture and things like that to it a little bit later. Yeah, so if you have not had a chance, this actual YouTube channel, I started it about, I think 11 or 12 years ago, right? And I started this channel because I enjoy watching other creators create. Like, I enjoy the process of like time lapse. I just like creativity, and I love to see like other artists create. For one, I learn something most of the time. Like, I'm learning something from it, but it's something very satisfying from going from like a blank canvas to a fleshed out, whether this is traditional or digital, just going from like a blank to like a completely fleshed out idea. There's something very, very satisfying about it. What I was having trouble with was that I wasn't seeing necessarily what I wanted to see. And so I decided to start this channel to to do that. And is there anything on this layer? Nope. And in order to do that, I didn't have a direction. I was just, at that time, I was making a lot of fan art. I think the very first video was a painting that I did for a family friend of ours who likes Sasuke from Naruto. And I painted Sasuke, and I remember painting like, some self portraits or anything like that. But if you have not check those out, there's some really awesome artwork. Now the camera quality isn't the greatest, especially compared to today's standards, but um, they're really nice. I've gone back and watched some of it, and I do that from time to time. Just some of that, what, I don't know why I do that. I go back from time to time to watch some of the old videos. And it's very interesting, it's very nostalgic for me because, I was in the different places in different times of the videos. Again, I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do with this channel. It's still evolving as, 12 years later. It's still evolving. But one of the things that I did and consistently do is I just painted what I wanted to see, right? I painted I had actually there for a short while. I had set myself up with this challenge where I was going to do a painting every day for 90 days. And I called it B90X. I did. Called it B90X. And I didn't last 90 days. I didn't. What ended up happening was I was doing these paintings, and at that time I was in my people pleasing era, right? Where was very reliant on making everybody happy, right? So as I was doing this particular project, I did my B90X. I was asking everybody in my family, who do you want to see? And everybody was getting excited and was participating in the whole thing. And it was a lot of fun, but it was so overwhelming because it was like, well, if I don't paint what, this person wants to see, I don't want them to be upset. And it was just too much. I was putting too much pressure on myself. But I was thinking about doing something like that again. Uh, not taking suggestions. Not gonna take any suggestions. But I was thinking about doing something like that again, just to sort of do sketches and things like that. I do them for shorter periods of time. I might do like a week at a time where I'm sketching portraits and things. And I might do that with landscapes, since landscapes are something that I really want to grow and learn more of and to get better at. So I might actually do that with landscapes. But yeah, all of that's on there. You go back far enough on this particular YouTube channel, you'll find all kinds of content, all kinds of like videos. And I remember a time when I was like super scared to get on camera and like didn't want to do voiceovers and the whole thing. Like I've gone through every phase of growth that I can possibly think of, on this particular channel. You know what? I did something. So earlier, you guys may have heard that I said, okay, so the lighter the thing is, the farther away it is. But I did the exact opposite here. I don't know why I did that. And that's why you have fun. But you also want to be consistent. So if the furthest back in our forest is the lightest color, I want to keep that consistent with my path. Again, going back into, if you're going to paint something, it has to be believable, right? So keeping my background somewhat light, I do want to keep that same energy in my path. And I'm glad I caught that, because I would have hate to like render out this whole thing and and it's not consistent. Rookie move, Britt. Rookie move. That's okay. So we're going to pick up this dark color because you're not going to see any of this in his clothes. We're going to bring it up front. Now again, there's a little bit of a lag on my end, but that's why it's great that we're doing like big broad strokes. This doesn't have to be perfect. And I'll work on this more once we get off of live, just kind of throughout the week. But I do want you guys to kind of see how I set this up. And I want to set it up for myself so that I kind of have more of a blueprint. So it adds to my sketch and things like that, which is acting as my blueprint for where to place things. But this is going to help me. There we go. Oh, my computer's taking a minute to catch up to me. Okay. But this is sort of act as my guideline as I move forward in this particular picture. So yeah, lots and lots of videos on this channel. A whole lot of videos. But yeah, I remember going through that sort of phase of, gosh, I'm doing this thing and I want to make everybody happy. And sort of that's a life lesson. You know what I mean? Sometimes you have to make sure that your glass is full and that, you're okay before you can begin to do for other people, because that was a very overwhelming situation I put myself in. And I didn't finish it. My B90X, not P90X, my B90X. But one of these days, I think that would be great to do some studies, maybe go to the park one day and study some trees and things like that. Okay, so we've got our scene set up for the most part. Now I'm going to go ahead and color in my main character. He doesn't really show much of his skin, but we're gonna label it skin. For the most part, he's gonna be very dark, and you only see bits and pieces of his sort of, the things that he's wearing, just based on the light that's being generated by the lantern that he's holding. But it's not going to be a whole lot of, not too much detail, and it doesn't need to be too much detail, so that our sort of story we're telling is, which path does he choose. So we want the focus to be on the two swords in the path, and of course his, silhouette of his body. So I'm going to go back to my very first reference, which had the people who were walking in the dark. There we go. And we're going to just kind of pick colors from them. And I can turn off my symmetry ruler. Yeah, so I'm hoping, now this is our 10th episode, I believe. I think this is episode 10 of Painting Live. I'm hoping that this is encouragement for you guys to start to work on your dream projects, right? You have to make time for it. You have to, because if you don't, before you know it, the year is over with. We're already in August, right? And I started this particular project in July. I waited. It took me that long to sort of decide that I needed to carve out time specifically for the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. So whatever it is that you are dreaming of doing, whether that is travel, whether that is learning a language, whether you are working on your favorite art piece or a piece of music or a YouTube channel, or whatever the thing is that you're working on, I want this series to be encouragement for you to begin that process, right? There's never, ever, ever going to be a perfect, like, this is the absolute perfect time. There's always going to be something that you're going to need to do, right? There's always something to do. So you have to intentionally set aside time for yourself to work on your dream projects. And one thing that I can attest to, just sort of having gone through this now and getting back into the swing of developing this deck, is that things are falling into place a lot better now that I'm actually working on that, desire that I had, almost like fulfilling a purpose, right? So if you have this purpose, you usually aren't going to find your purpose until you start leaning into your passions. Now, which again goes back to, it's time to start setting aside time to do that thing you want to do. So if you want to learn graphic design, if you want to, learn how to illustrate, especially here, since, it's just the few of us here. If you want me to show you something, right? Ask. I'm here. I'm opening up that door for you, like we did with Sam and Lee last week. If there is something that you would like for me to show you guys, something that you're interested in, that I can help with, I offer that. I send out that invitation to you here and now, because if I can help you, I'm more than happy to. It's my pleasure to do so. So don't be scared either. I know when I've done comic conventions, and we have one next month, it's going to be a lot of fun. But usually when I do conventions and like festivals and things like that, I'll meet a lot of specifically younger artists who are like, "Oh, I'm so scared to ask you. I've been looking for. I wanted to ask you. I'm so scared to say the third. Don't be scared. I'm just a person. Most people are just people. Everybody's just people, right? If there's something that you want to know, something that I can help you with, I certainly invite you to ask. Closed mouths don't get fed, right? Now, also, Asterisk. Be respectful in how you ask, of course, but I know I don't have to tell you guys that, right? But yeah, if there's anything I can help you with artistically, right? If there's anything I can help you with in terms of what I've learned about publishing a tarot deck, if you would like an artist critique, right? You want me to kind of critique your work, kind of show you the areas of improvement that you can work on, let me know. I've seen some artists that do like the draw overs, which I always think are fun, where a person kind of submits their work and they're like, I don't know how to make this more realistic, or I'm having trouble with this area of the painting, especially when it comes to portraits and things like that, because that's sort of like, that's me. I love a good portrait. Let me know. I don't mind sharing that, right? It doesn't take a lot of time out of my day to do it. And I like to think that I'm very compassionate because I've been there. We all start somewhere. It's one of the things that I think I can accredit to art school. So I didn't go to a dedicated art school. I went to University of Tennessee and I went to the University of Memphis, but I was within the art program, right? Because I studied graphic design, took illustration classes, the whole thing, right? So I was in the art department. And one of the things that I am thankful for from that experience is that you learn how to take constructive criticism. You also learn how to give constructive criticism, right? So I know sometimes, especially as artists who maybe have not had that particular experience, for someone to critique our work, it can, especially if you connected to it, right? If you're working on something that is like your baby, this is your thing you've been working on. Sometimes it is difficult to hear criticism, but if it's done in a way where I think, for one, you're empathetic to the person, or sympathetic, empathetic, compassionate to that person, I think it's a way to deliver criticism that can be well received, if you're ready to receive it. Now, if you're not ready to receive it, then you're not ready to receive it. It's always going to come off as I don't know the phrase. It's always going to be difficult to take, right? If you're not ready to receive it. But yeah, if you are, and you maybe need some help with design, or you need some help with illustration and things like that, how to set up files for books, that kind of thing, let me know. I'll be more than happy to sort of walk you through it. And one of the things that is interesting, I always found interesting, even when I was in art, in school, in college, was that art is a very subjective thing, right? So in terms of style and stuff like that, like I can't critique someone's style. It's like me critiquing your handwriting, right? However, if it's something like, color theory, maybe you shouldn't use these two colors together because, it gives off whatever the message is, or it doesn't work as well as you might think it is, that kind of thing. When it comes to like basics, foundational type stuff, I'm more than happy to help out in that area. All right, so we have our basic basis of our picture done. Now, over the next week or so, as I work through this, and even when we come back next week, next Sunday, this is going to evolve quite a bit. But this is a pretty good start. Actually, before we go, because we're going to wrap this up here soon. But before we go, I'm going to actually paint in our swords, just to sort of set up, that part of the painting, so that when I go to do this off live, it'll be a little bit easier for me to see. So yeah, but we've gotten a little bit done. We these first couple of days of painting is always about sort of laying down the brickwork, the foundation of our pictures, and then once we've gotten there, then we can sort of flesh out what it is that we're trying to articulate. And I'm actually going to turn this off so I can see. There we go. So yeah, I was thinking about that. Now, I know we were the Graphic Artists Guild, and I've mentioned this before, which I am currently the Southern Regional Rep for. We have had some in-person events where, you can draw and things like that live. If you're in the Memphis area, and not for the Graphic Artists Guild, just sort of if y'all want to hang out. If you're in the Memphis area, maybe you want to go to the zoo and draw. Or if you're in anywhere in Tennessee, I'll travel. But if you're in the Memphis area specifically, so I won't have to travel, and you want to just sort of hang out and draw and talk art and things like that, if that's something that you're interested in doing, because we weren't able to do it this past when we had the last sort of event with the guild, because I wasn't able to, as part of the responsibilities of the Southern Regional Rep, I have to organize those types of events. I just wasn't able to. But if one day, a few of us want to get together and go to like the Dixie Museum or something like that and draw in the gardens before this weather gets cold, let me know. If you want to do this virtually, let me know. I think what would have been a lot of fun in the last stream is if we had an opportunity to kind of draw together. That would have been awesome. So maybe we'll get a chance to do that in the future. Now, again, there's an easier way for me to do this. I could have used my lasso tool to outline the shape, but it's something about like painting in the brush strokes that adds to the slight imperfection of creating artwork. Doesn't have to be perfect, right? I just want to feel the stylus against the screen as I paint this in. Yeah, if you're interested in doing it, if you want to come on live and paint with me, let me know. So far, I've had some really awesome, like the two interviews that we've done with Sam and Lee, or the one that we did with Sam and Lee, and the one that we also did with Sajay, happened beautifully because it was like everything was in alignment for us. Just kind of happened on a whim, and we made it happen. So if you would like to also have some time to shine on this particular channel, don't be shy. I don't bite. I want to hear from you, and I want to see what you guys have working on. So I think we beat the storm. It was supposed to storm today. I heard some thundering, and I was trying to get as much of this done as possible before that storm took place. There we go. Okay. So we're getting there. We have the idea of what we're going for. And I'll show you again, if you're just joining us, all of my reference material for this particular card. I'm going to slide this over so you can kind of see what I'm going for and what sort of vibe we're going for. So here's our original Two of Swords, right? It is a scene that takes place at night. Now, she is by some water. We just did water. I didn't want to do water again. But she's holding her two swords. She's blindfolded. It is nighttime as indicated by the moon. Both swords are identical. They are said to be very heavy. They look like very heavy swords, and she's sort of holding them up, blindfolded. She has an option. This is supposed to be a card of choice, of decision making, right? To me, it did not read as choice and decision. If I'm going back to that 16-year-old girl who picked up her first tarot deck, if I'm looking at this, I'm not thinking choice, right? So I wanted to change that idea and actually demonstrate a choice, right? So this guy, our main character here in our painting, has a choice to go left or right. He cannot go straight because there's a big old tree blocking his way, but his path can go either left or right. And it is signaled by the two decorative swords. And to me, that means that either choice is the right choice. There is no bad choice. But I also wanted the paths to look somewhat identical. So today, all we did was lay down our base colors and things like that. I do have some references that I'll show you guys, and this is just us recapping what we've done so far. So this is the reference that I think I'm going to use for the bulk of the color choices. And I've gone back and forth between this and other references that I'll show you here in a sec. But I like this because the forest is very blue. This is a swords air card, and I want it to feel blue. Although what I will say is that because he's in this very dense forest, it's almost suffocating. So that's a very interesting sort of takeaway from the way that this card is designed. It's a very heavy card because there's a lot going on in the background, but this is an air card because it is a sword, right? Thinking of thoughts and things like that. So perhaps this very dense forest kind of speaks to his particular mindset, sort of where his mind is. Just me rattling off, and these all be things that I'll talk about in one of the guidebooks, but just to give you a little bit of an insight into the decisions that I've made in order to create this card, right? So this is the reference that I'll use for my color because he is holding a lantern, and this lantern will light him, very similar to the character here, this fella here, who has the orange around his head. That's kind of what happens when light is in front of you. From behind, you only see sort of the outline of your your shape, right? And the light, the reflective light. So that's our main reference, right? And then we have a few other references that I'm looking at for the shapes of the trees. I'm also looking at the composition, how the backgrounds look. I'm looking at how the leaves look on the tree. So I'm using all of these references as a sort of, guidebook, if you will, for color, shape, uh, just sort of how things look in real life. And so if you're an artist, that's something that I want you to take into consideration when you're finding references. Don't just copy the reference unless you're studying. Now, if you're studying, absolutely copy the reference just so to get an idea of the composition, the color, that kind of thing. But as you begin to make your own original artwork, I don't want you to copy references, just straight out copy references. I want you to take a little bit of make it a puzzle, right? Take elements from different images to create something of your own. So this is our reference. This is where we leave it off. And it's been about an hour. And I want to thank you so much for joining me this very chill afternoon. I won't hold you too long this week. We'll be back next Sunday. Just me. We'll also be working on this particular card. So we'll have a little more progress on it between now and then, I think. If not, it's all good. We'll keep going where we leave off. I have a little more of a plan and an idea of where I want to, go with the different elements of this picture. But I thank you so much again if you're watching this live or the replay. Thank you so much. I want to wish you all a happy, creative, and prosperous day. And until next time, peace.